With CWL Vegas right around the corner, I decided to pick up the phone and call my good buddy Tunn across the pond, heading into CWL Vegas. Obviously, it's going to be a very fun tournament to watch, and I thought I would have another guy to talk along the polls with me. Buddy, how's it going today?
I'm good. I was just thinking to myself, I'm glad this is on Skype because if you were calling me for the amount of time we talk, your phone bill would look horrible at the end of the month. So
That's very true.
I'm excited though. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm excited for the event, of course, as well. But there's plenty to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, there is a lot to talk about. Obviously, pools were decided just a few short days ago, and so I thought it'd only be right that we kind of give our opinions. Granted, there are only, as of this moment, 3 teams in each group, but it should be fun to kind of give our speculation, maybe give a few sleeper teams or pool of death, etc. So, with that in mind, everyone in the Call of Duty scene, Ton, as you know, likes to say, what is the pool of death? What is the most difficult pool looking like heading into Vegas? And so I thought it'd only be right to start off by asking you that question. Out of the 4 groups that we have, granted, like we said, only 3 in each, what right now do you think is going to be the most difficult pool heading into Vegas?
I think it has to be A, because I think for me, you look 100 Thieves and a United already in there. Both teams look relatively decent online. We'd look at them too on paper as well and look very, very solid. And I think if you look at all the other teams that come out of pot C or pot 3 or whatever it was, Reciprocity are probably the scariest team for me. Yeah, a lot of people would argue Evil Geniuses, but we'll see how they do. But at the same time, I look at Team Reciprocity and they look like a team who could cause problems. Now, I'm not saying they're going to beat 100 Thieves at a United, but I think they've got a pretty good chance of doing something. And I just think that they're going to be great games. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team does with the addition of Dens coming in as well, and Tommy obviously joining the 3 former Unilive players. And they're over in Vegas now as well, so they're getting practice. They're not going to be jet lagged. They're not going to be thinking about the 11-hour flight that I have to do, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, and then so there's a lot of things in their favor. So let's see what they can do. There's no pressure on them to do anything in that group, but I think they could really mix up 100 Thieves and a United.
Yeah, I think so too. There was a lot of people, I actually tweeted out and I was like, what is everyone's pool of death? And everyone's kind of given their opinions, over the last few days, whether it's been on Twitter, whether it's even been on Reddit. And I feel like A has kind of been the more defining answer, but I've seen like pretty much every pool kind of get thrown out there. And I think it's a definite cause to ask for it because no one really knows how everyone's going to play when it comes down to that tournament,
Yeah, and I think everyone has an argument. You look at B, it's like, well, if Luminosity show up as good as what they look on paper, then that one's a toss-up between them and Red Reserve because a lot of people are leaning towards Red Reserve. But then Evil Geniuses are no spring chickens either. So, I mean, that's obviously going to be a decent one. Then Pool C, you look at that one. That could be really close. I actually don't know. FaZe Clan, Team Envy. I don't think Team Mad Cat are too concerned by that poll. I think if you look at it from the outside, what group would you rather went into? I think FaZe Clan Team Envy, you probably want to go into that one. So they could cause problems there. And then FaZe Clan and Envy against each other is always going to be a good game. And then Pool of D, I mean, obviously everyone's looking towards Optic, but there is huge pressure on them to do good here. So I think that the Splice have looked pretty good online as well and have a very solid roster. And G2, you don't really know, but Splice and Optic for me, it could potentially be a toss-up. So I think there's arguments for every single group. Yeah,
I definitely agree. But to kind of go along with your pick for the pool of death, I have to agree with you. I think Pool A to me looks the scariest, at least as far as online results are considered. We've seen Hunter T, especially in the Pro Down, place very well, getting into that top 2 placement despite not having the greatest performance versus OG. They still make it there and have looked better as of recent. We talk about E United. They've been consistent throughout the Pro Down, throughout the 2Ks, etc. And then with Reciprocity, right, as far as the EU 2Ks are considered, top 2 and back-to-back ones. So for me, I think Pool A should be, at least if you want to look at placements, if you want to even look at talent-wise, one of the scariest pools in my eyes. But let's go and move on and kind of go in order here to Pool B. We got Luminosity, Red Reserve, Evil Geniuses, and then obviously with the play-in team and open bracket squad as well. I gotta say, Ton, I was kind of making the prediction when LG started off this game. I thought, okay, gonna be arguments. It's probably not going to work the best because they do lose JCap in this situation, but they still have a very solid group of players. And I think when we look at that big 3, obviously talking about John, Formal and Gunless, I feel like when you look at that big 3, one thing that's interesting about some of these teams, even Hunter T included, is that they have a very high ceiling to move forward in. Like whenever you have a team who is great with communication, like E United, for example, they've got some really good pieces, but whenever you look at them on paper versus the LGs of the world, the Hunter Ts of the world, they only can, to me, go so far. Like communication can only get so good. And I think whenever you have a very solid slang front like LG more specifically has, they can only kind of go up from here. And they've looked a lot better over time. But how do you feel about LG in this group? And I also want to hear your thoughts about Red Reserve as well, because they have been a team that a lot of people have been talking about, but there isn't a whole lot of information about them right now.
There isn't. And first on to Luminosity, I think if you look at that team on paper, we said at the beginning of the year, these are going to be one of the top teams, but things just seem to be struggling a little bit online now. I think if they kept a hold of JCat, then for me, that seems to be the issue. I think if they had JCap he's never had a bad team. He's always led a good team. And I think they have the firepower there, but I don't know if they're orchestrating it right. So, I mean, this could be me. I could be clutching at straws here, but at the same time, it just doesn't seem to be working. You look at that talent, though, and you're very right. There is a very high skill ceiling for them, but they need to hit it pretty quick because it's an important event straight away. They cannot have a bad event here. Right, okay, they're already in pools, they're already qualified for the Pro League qualifier, but then they have to go into the Pro League qualifier and play their best. So they have to be careful. I think they will be fine, but they can't let things go catastrophically wrong, because you look at that team, they should be okay. But I'm really confused as to what the issue seems to be. I don't know if it's just a bad start, not getting along with things. We've seen 100 Thieves not have the greatest of starts as well, although they did get better over time, as said. But I think that you look at this team, and I think you're very, very right. They could definitely pick it up. And to be honest with you, if they click, it's going to be a problem, and they really could cause problems. But then you look at Red Reserve, I think they've been, I think, me and Brycey talk about it quite a lot. Like, Red Reserve seem to be not in many people's top fives for this event. And I think that's because a lot of people sort of see the new rosters that have formed and just think, this EU team, I'll never keep up with these top tier American teams now. But Red Reserve were the best team to not win an event last year, full stop, easily. And I think that you look at their roster, what they've done to it, they kept it the same. So they already had 6 months with scraps under their belt, and then another couple of years with the rest of the team, and then they had Bansin, who they've teamed with before and we know have been successful with. So if anything, Red Reserve got stronger. Yes, a lot of other people got stronger, but I think they kept that core, which not many people did. What was it, only FaZe and Evil Geniuses that didn't change something, as well as Red Reserve? So Red Reserve, for me, should top this group. I think their practice in Europe might hinder them slightly, but I think the longer that this event goes on, the sooner they get out to Vegas to start getting into their house and start getting practice under their belts, the scarier it's going to be for the competition.
Absolutely. I really agree with that as well. I haven't been able to watch too much of Red Reserve, but like you said, like their placements last year, just the addition of Bance, everything kind of echoes to me. They shouldn't have an issue as far as like continuing their play and kind of moving forward, especially with that chemistry, which I feel like is going to be huge moving into 5v5 and especially in a new title at Vegas. But a team who to me is much similar, are very similar to Red Reserve that you mentioned actually, is FaZe Clan, right? They pretty much keep the same core group, yet they add methods onto the team heading into the year. I think this is a very interesting team when we look at Pool C. They're obviously joined alongside the world champions who add Hook to their lineup and actually joined Team Envious as well. This is going to be an interesting group, I think it's fair to say. Granted, I would say Envy has looked very good online leading up into these online tournaments, but haven't had the greatest placements in the world. And they've seen some early knockouts. It's been a matter of them saying, well, hey, we weren't really practicing as hard, but we're kind of just scrimmaging. We were looking to try to, work on certain things, but obviously you can't take anything away from the world champions. But it is fair to say as well, Tunn, champs last year was strange, right? Evil Geniuses, top 8 team based on ELO, based on whatever you want to throw out there, a top 8 team. They win it all. Got to give them credit for that. And Grant, they add in
top 8 at a push, by the way.
Yeah, that was.
Some would argue it was top 12.
But talk to me about Pool C, right? These two teams, along with Mad Cat's roster. I mean, this one's kind of hard for me to call, but I feel like Envy is the best team in this group so far, but you can never sleep on FaZe, right? They are a very solid team, and they've taught us that time and time again. Yeah,
100% not. And I think that you look at FaZe and you look at the roster, you look at the addition that they make, and these are two teams that obviously they've kept the roster from last year, both of them, and then they moved into this year and made an addition. We knew that FaZe were after Hook by the sounds of things, and they didn't get him. So Envy got the man that FaZe wanted. In the end, FaZe have done all right. I think getting methods in there has improved this team. Getting Hook into Envy has improved Envy. So I think that both these teams, it's going to be very, very close. But honestly, I don't know what to think of Team Mad Cat yet. They've looked pretty decent online from what I've heard and seen when they've been scrimming. Dave looks like he's not necessarily back to his best, but the fire seems to be there that we didn't see in World War II. We know that Alex was a very solid player last year, and how fast he was would translate very, very well to Black Ops 4. And they have experience. So I'm interested to see what they do. Like, don't get me wrong, this team could finish 4th or 5th in their group, but they could also go on and maybe upset FaZe or Team Envy. I just don't know. That's the thing. We've seen the practice in Europe, and Red Reciprocity, Team Mad Cat, and Reedy's team and Heretics have all been scrimming each other, and Red Reserve seem to be above and beyond the best team. But outside of that, Reciprocity probably second, but you don't really know where the Europe lies in comparison to the Americans. It's very, very difficult. It's always that first event. You never know what's going to happen. But typically, last year, we did see a good performance out of the European team. So, I think now as things get a little bit more serious, the gap is no longer there. So I think them coming into this one could potentially cause upsets. As said at the beginning, I think that this was a pool they probably, if they looked at it and they could have selected, you would have probably chose that one. I think they've got a chance, but I think it's going to be very difficult because we know how stacked the top 8 teams are right now, and there is a bit of a drop-off. But I do believe Team Mad Cat could potentially get some results here, but it's really difficult to judge where they're actually at. But as far as this pool's concerned, I think that FaZe might take it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's hard to call, right? For sure, especially with
super hard.
We talk about like all the online placements. Do you really take those into consideration, et cetera, et cetera? But let's talk about a pool that I would say for a lot of fans out there, it's pretty easy for them to call, especially based on the online performance that we've seen from the Optic Gaming squad, of course, is the one that I'm talking about. They've won the 2Ks, they've won the Pro Down. I think out of the 3 tournaments that they've played, I think they've lost a total of 4 maps in itself, which is a crazy stat line to even think about. They're joined by Splice as well as G2. Granted, G2, I think it's fair to say, they haven't really appeared on my radar too much. Splice, though, like you mentioned earlier, could be a sleeper team, right? They've kind of been under the radar for a lot of these online tournaments. They've placed 3rd in the Pro Down, taking down Envy and LG. And as far as the 2Ks are considered, they placed top 8 and then improved to top 4. So I don't know, man. I feel like this group, we were kind of talking about it, in prior Dispatch episodes, like how is this Splice team going to work? Like how is the communication even going to be a thing here? And, granted, you could argue whether or not it's a ticking time bomb or not, but this team right now is, at least online, performing very well.
Yeah, I think you look at this team, Splice, and you would say that Looney is really controlling it. And we know how good of a leader he can be. Yes, okay, you look at the team that he had on Rise, and maybe he doesn't have the tools that he had then. But we've seen time and time again, his performances were good in that Rise team last year, and he brought more than just his performances. Now, going into the Splice roster, the question marks were around Temp and Aqua. Let's not beat around the bush. They really were. I questioned them when I heard from Mark. I was like, whoa, this seems a little bit strange. And as far as I am aware, they actually could have picked up Methods as well, but chose to go with Aqua. So they've got a lot of trust in... Sorry, I'm going to have to say it. How do you guys say it? I say Aqua. You say... How do you say Aqua?
No.
Aqua. I don't know. I say it differently, but either way,
I don't know how to say it exactly. But regardless, Yuli. We'll call him Yuli. That's his name.
We'll go with Yuli. So those two on that team with the question marks. They obviously trust the decisions that they've made. I think Looney will direct this team very well, very, very well. Now, I'm not a superstitious man, but if I was, I would look at the previous result on Dallas and who got Optic Gaming and eventually got knocked out by last year.
Say it.
Splice.
Say it.
Splice.
Say it to us, Tunn.
Splice.
Let us know. I was gonna say that out there if you didn't.
Completely different team. It's a completely different team.
True.
It couldn't be. It's literally dead. That's all. But at the same time, I don't know. You could throw it in there, but realistically for me, everyone does expect Optic Gaming to win this pool. Irrelevant if it just being online. It's still an impressive stat line, isn't it? Yes, okay, we don't put too much stock into it being online, but at the same time, they've only lost 4 maps or something like that.
It's absurd.
Yeah, but at the same time, they don't want to peak too early. I think if they've been playing so well online, and I'm just trying to, I'd made comments negatively about Optic so far in some videos and on Spitfire. Not plug it too much. I know you don't mind me doing it, but at the same time, I'm trying to look for chinks in the armor of Optic Gaming to try and find a way to see how people could beat them. I got a couple. My main one was actually towards Dashi, and I know you have a lot of time for Dashi, and he's obviously a talent, and he's one of the next big talents in our scene. If he gets the placements that this team expect, if they have a year like last year and something goes wrong, then his stock's going to fall. But for me, Dashi's only placed top 16. That is his highest placement in World War II. So yes, okay, you could say the rest of the team surrounding him obviously makes a difference, but he hasn't had to deal with that pressure at the top level. You're in Optic Gaming, one of the biggest esports organizations in the world, the supposed number one team going into this event. There is a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He has never been in the scenario where he's got to go in against a high caliber team in a winner's bracket final, a loser's final, a grand final. He's never been in that position. So there's going to be question marks around that. I think he'd probably be fine, but you have to look at that as a potential issue. And again, I know a lot of people are saying, I don't know why people are saying this, but at the same time, Optic Gaming dominated online in World War II at the beginning as well. So I am currently just sitting on the fence. And I'm just saying, I don't know if they are necessarily going to dominate. The competition has got higher and higher. Let's see, though. I think if they can translate that online form to offline at LAN, then they should win the event. Surely. But it's a case of if they can translate that to LAN and if that roster can fulfill its potential. And if it does, they should win the event. But realistically, there are still question marks around Optic Gaming.